The young girl went home on New Year's Eve and disappeared before reaching her apartment, only 150 meters. The police immediately began an investigation that quickly became the largest in the area. It was only after a month that they learned a shocking truth that no one was prepared for. Friends, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's very important. Rachel Moran was born on January 17, 1981 in England. She was the youngest of 4 children. She had 2 sisters and a brother. Together they lived in a town called Hull. From an early age, she was fond of music and dance, preferring ballet. In high school, she always excelled and then went to a local college where she studied information technology. She later changed direction, deciding to improve in her favorite business, dancing. In college, Rachel met a guy named Mark, and soon the couple began dating. After a while, they decided to live together and rented an apartment in a quiet sleeping area. Their apartment complex was only a kilometer from Rachel's parents' house, so the girl constantly visited them. She also took a part-time job at a local bakery as a cake decorator. She quickly fell in love with this activity and began to think about getting a cooking education. In December 2002, when Rachel was 21, she and her boyfriend decided to have 2 kittens. The girl took care of them and gave them most of her free time. He and Mark tried not to leave the kittens alone for long, so they always tried to plan their affairs so that one of them was at home and watched the animals. In this regard, they have planned in advance how to celebrate the new year. Mark was to go to her parents' house and return home by nightfall, while Rachel planned to go to a bar with her brother and meet New Year's Eve there. She was to return with him to her parents' house and spend the night there. On the evening of December 31, Rachel met her brother and they went to a bar. They were joined by several mutual friends, and the company met the new year there. After midnight, Rachel and her brother left the house and arrived at their parents' house around 1:20 am. Rachel talked to her mom before she went to bed. She decided to call the guy to see how he was doing. However, Mark did not answer the house phone, and the girl called on her mobile. This time, he picked up the phone and said his friends invited him to a party. Rachel was upset that Mark left the house against their agreement and left the kittens alone all night. Then she decided not to spend the night at her parents' and went home. When her mother found out, she tried to talk her daughter out of it because it was a long night. Despite the fact that the girl's apartment was only a kilometer away, the mother was very worried for her safety at this time of day. She and Rachel argued for a long time, but eventually the girl went home. Having promised her mother to call as soon as she got there, the mother waited about an hour and a half, but no call from her daughter ever came. So she called her cell first, then her home phone. All these calls went unanswered, and the woman began to worry. She thought Rachel might have gone to the party where her boyfriend was, and she's not answering her phone. The mother tried to call her until about 4:30 in the morning, but eventually decided to go to bed. The woman woke up at about 10 am and saw her husband on the phone. However, their eldest daughter was on the other end of the wire. She called her parents because she couldn't get in touch with Rachel all morning, and it was really bothering her. Realizing that the girl had not yet returned home, all her relatives began to panic. They kept trying to reach her, and after a long time, Mark picked up the phone. The guy was surprised when he was asked if Rachel was home. He said he got home around 7:00 in the morning and the girl wasn't there. The young man thought she was staying the night at her parents' house, so he did not give it any importance and went to bed. According to the stamp in the apartment, there was no sign that Rachel came home. There were no items of hers in which the girl went to the bar. The bed was made just like when the guy left, and the kittens weren't fed. All this made Rachel's family panic even more. They called all of her daughter's friends and other relatives, but no one saw her that night. Then the girl's parents decided to go to the police. Although Rachel was almost 22, the investigators could have waited some time since the disappearance of the adult, but in this case they decided to begin the search immediately. They examined her apartment and spoke with all her relatives and friends. The police immediately dismissed the possibility that Rachel had just run off of her own volition. All of her biography and stories of close people contradicted this possibility. During the conversation with investigators, the girl's mother remembered one moment. That night, when Rachel was going back to her apartment, Her mother started arguing with her literally on the doorstep. They stood with the door open while the woman begged her daughter to stay. At one point, an unknown man walked along the street. Rachel's mum even thought about asking him to walk her home, but she changed her mind. Having received a very cursory description of the man, the police began to search for him. He was going the same way Rachel went a few minutes later, so the man could see something. They put out an ad on all the patrolmen, and in the meantime, they kept looking for other leads. Detectives started looking into Mark, the missing girl's boyfriend. First, they learned that there was an altercation that night when Rachel found out that he had gone to the party. Secondly, Mark didn't seem upset when talking to the police, even though his girlfriend disappeared in the middle of the night. All this made the investigators think that he might have something to do with her disappearance. Then they decided to check out his alibi. Mark said he came back from the party after 6:00 a.m. The police talked to all the people who were there, and they confirmed the young man's story. Her family also insisted that he would never hurt her. Investigators have requested information from Rachel's mobile operator and bank. They discovered that the girl had not used her phone or bank cards since her disappearance. In those years, they couldn't track the location of her cell phone, and cell tower data was almost useless at such a short distance. The police then decided to retrieve all the surveillance footage within a 10 km radius of her route. They sent patrols to every store, as well as through the residents of these neighborhoods, hoping that one of them had security cameras. They soon managed to spot Rachel. She hit one of the cameras just a few hundred meters from her apartment complex. This once again confirmed that the girl went home and nowhere else. Detectives focused their search on this area. They brought in dog handlers with search dogs, helicopters, and dozens of officers who scoured the streets, fields, and water bodies. They also began draining streams and artificial canals to search them completely, but all of this failed. As the days passed, the police were more and more convinced that Rachel might no longer be alive. Nevertheless, they continued their active and extensive search. 2 weeks later, they had their first disturbing lead. After draining one of the canals near Rachel's apartment, they found her shoe there, in which the girl left her mother's house. The next day, in the same channel, they found a garbage bag containing a woman's handbag with a cosmetic phone and other items. One of them was a passport belonging to Rachel Moran. All these things made the girl's relatives and investigators think she was more than likely dead. The police continued to search the canals, suggesting that an unknown perpetrator might have dumped Rachel's body there. However, further searches came to nothing. The following days, detectives threw more energy at the case. They decided to resort to a very popular tactic in England. The police found a woman who looked like Rachel. They gave her clothes similar to those on the girl the night she disappeared and asked her to follow the same route. All this was filmed on cameras, and later investigators gave the recordings to local TV channels. The whole point of this experiment was to find witnesses who could have seen Rachel the night she disappeared but didn't give it any thought or even forgot about it. The visual reconstruction of the painting could help them remember the details, and it worked. Following the release of the video, several people contacted the police and shared their observations. The detectives checked them out, but ultimately it did no good for the case. But the detectives did manage to get something meaningful. In addition to witnesses, they were contacted by the owners of the security cameras installed in the area. During the first days of the investigation, the police received most of these recordings, but some of them did miss them. This worked. The school authorities, approximately 150 meters from Rachel's apartment, handed them the records for that night. The police saw a woman walking towards the same residential complex. The quality of the tape was very poor, but time investigators assumed it was Rachel. After only a few seconds, she was followed by a man, and the detectives thought it was the unknown perpetrator who had attacked the girl. Unfortunately, the quality of the recording made it impossible to discern absolutely none. The police then suggested that if this was the man behind Rachel's abduction, he couldn't have dragged her body too far because he was without a car. They admitted that the perp lived in the area and decided to try to search every house within a 2 km radius of that location. Of course, They needed the permission of the tenants, as well as a very long time. The investigators therefore engaged more than 100 officers who knocked on all the houses and apartments, asking permission to inspect the premises. They proceeded on 28 January. The police officers were divided into groups of 3, each consisting of one specialist who knew how to inspect the premises correctly. A few hours later, one of these groups came to Nashgard Street. The police began to knock on every door. After the officers reached the last apartment, something alarming was waiting for them. They immediately called the chief detective and asked to come there immediately. When the policeman knocked on the last apartment, a man opened it and let them in. Officers searched the premises but did not notice anything suspicious. However, before leaving, one of them saw a small garbage storage room. They met quite often in such apartments, and the police decided to take a last look there, but the door to the storage room was locked. The officers asked the man to give them the key, but he said he did not remember where he was. They kept insisting that he look for the key to make sure there was nothing in his apartment. The man walked around the apartment and after a while found the key. The police opened the door and found a lot of garbage bags, empty packages, boxes and so on inside. They started cleaning up this junk because the storage room was full. At some point, one of the policemen froze. He took out another bag and saw a human leg. After a few seconds, he took out the rest of the garbage and realized that Rachel Moran's body was in front of him. It was wrapped in a blanket and barely fit in this closet. She was very short, and the officers were very surprised how the criminal managed to put a human body there. The police immediately arrested the landlord and his friend, who was visiting him at the time of their visit. The occupant was 23-year-old Michael Little, who reacted calmly to his arrest, but his friend was shocked by what was happening. He did not see what was in the pantry and did not understand why they were being detained. After arresting them, the officers called the chief detective and waited for his arrival. First, a car came to the scene and the police took a friend of the landlord to the station. Little stayed in the apartment with another officer waiting for the next crew. The policeman decided not to waste time and tried to talk the man. To his surprise, Little almost immediately began to confess all the details. The man started by saying, "I'm so glad you found her. I wanted to tell someone about it for a long time." He told the police the chronology of the events that led to the girl's death, but the officer found this version questionable. According to Little, on New Year's Eve, he spotted Rachel on the street, went and talked to her, offering to go to his apartment. The girl agreed and they went to his house. The two had a few drinks, after which there was an argument between them. Little did not specify her reasons, but said that he had gone to another room. Returning to the kitchen, he saw Rachel standing with her back to him. The man approached her and noticed that the girl was holding a knife. The next second, she turned to him and cut his hand. Little panicked, grabbed the kitchen knife and stabbed her, which killed Rachel. The policeman doubted the truth of the story because it sounded rather illogical. However, he recorded Little's confession and the man was soon taken to the station. During the interrogation, he confirmed what he had told the officer and insisted that he had acted in self-defense. On the obvious question of why he did not call the police, Little said he was scared. The man thought no one would believe him. So he decided to hide the body in his closet. After studying his biography, the police found out that Little has an impressive criminal history. From an early age, he was caught in theft and other minor offenses. He was expelled from school several times, so he did not even get a basic education. The man practically did not work. He stayed home drinking and weed. The policeman talked to several of his friends, and they said that Little often fantasized about him dating different women. He even once told them that he was dating a beautiful blonde woman, 6 feet tall, although his friends knew full well that he was not really in a relationship. This detail seemed interesting. Rachel was about the same height and blonde hair. They admitted that Little fantasized about a girl of this time and could choose Rachel as a victim based on these parameters. At the same time, the police discovered that the girl had not met Little, although they lived on the neighboring streets. Investigators attempted to reconstruct the timeline of that night and discovered that the suspect had met with friends on the evening of 31 December. They were preparing to celebrate the new year, but Little left their company. The man was angry that the girl he tried to flirt with left with his friend. Little then went to another party, but shortly after midnight he said he would go home. The route from where the party was taking was down the same road Rachel walked down. After comparing all the facts, the detectives came to an alarming conclusion. Remember that stranger who passed Rachel and her mum when she was trying to convince her daughter not to walk home, and her mother also thought about asking this man to walk Rachel home. According to the police, this person was Little. This version was indirectly confirmed by the surveillance footage. Detectives had been reviewing the records where Rachel was first recorded. A man who looked like Little had walked down the same road about 3 minutes before, but on the second tape, everything changed when Rachel was on another camera. An unknown man was already walking behind her. If it was Little, he'd have to stop somewhere and wait for the girl to pass by. Then he started chasing her. This version of events ran counter to the man's own story, but more controversy came after medical experts submitted their report. The victim suffered 27 stab wounds, inflicted with extreme force. Rachel did not have any defensive wounds. Little said that there was a struggle between them. In addition, some blows were inflicted on the girl from the back. As for the suspect himself, no cut was found on his hands. All these facts made it clear that his story was untrue. Based on all available evidence, the detectives came up with a more plausible theory. That night, Little was pissed off about being rejected at the first party. As he passed Rachel's mother's house, he heard part of their conversation and realized that the girl was going home alone. Rachel also conformed to the type that the man fantasized about, and he decided either to attack her or try to talk to her. Going forward, he stepped off the main road and waited for Rachel to pass. He then began to follow her, and the situation could develop into two scenarios. Either he immediately attacked her or tried to flirt with her. In the second case, Rachel probably would have ignored him and left. First, she had a boyfriend. Secondly, she wouldn't go to the house of a stranger who approached her in the middle of the night. Third, Rachel was very worried about her kittens when she found out the guy had left them for the night. She couldn't think of anything else and tried to get home as quickly as possible. More likely, he assaulted the girl when she was as close to his house as possible and dragged her into the apartment. Soon, forensics confirmed this. There were traces of dirt on the back of Rachel's legs. This indicated that she was dragged along the ground. Forensics also determined the girl wasn't killed in the kitchen, but in the hallway. That's where they found most of the blood that the perp was trying to clean up. As a result, the police admitted that Little had killed her immediately after they arrived at the apartment. In all this, the medical examiners determined that the victim was assaulted, and Little's DNA was found on her body. Given the anticipated timeline, Rachel could already be dead by now. On that basis, a man was charged with murder on 31 January. By then, however, Little had already hired a lawyer and decided to retract his original testimony, stating that he had not killed anyone. As a result, the case was transferred to court and the trial began in October. There, the lawyers announced a new version of Little. Now the man claimed the killer was actually his friend Mark, the same one who was arrested with him the day the body was found, but was later released because no evidence connected him to the case. According to Little, he returned to the house near morning and saw his friend and Rachel there. Mark said that he and his girlfriend met and decided to go to Little's apartment because Mark had keys. The three of them had a drink, after which Rachel went into Little's bedroom and made intimate contact with him. Soon after, a furious Mark burst into the room. He felt sympathy for the girl and was furious to learn of their affair. The man grabbed a knife and stabbed Rachel multiple times, then threatened Little. He demanded help with the blood removal and never to tell anyone about what had happened. Otherwise, he threatened to kill not only Little, but also his loved ones. As you can guess, nobody believed this story. It contradicted not only the evidence, but also common sense. All indications were that Little was the killer, and there was no evidence of his friend's involvement. The trial ended fairly quickly, as the defense failed to produce any evidence refuting their client's guilt. As a result, Little was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 25 years. If his petition is approved, the man can be released at 58. Rachel's murder hit all her relatives hard, but her older sister was the worst hit. The girl had diabetes, and the stress of the illness had a serious impact on her health. After a long struggle, she died in 2010. Her family blames Little for everything. Thus, the actions of this criminal led to 2 deaths at once. Share your opinion in the comments, and do not forget to like under this clip if you liked it. I also recommend to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.